It was 7:14 a.m. when a sheriff's deputy pulled his gun, then holstered it, and, in a voice that sounded like he'd just seen a ghost in hiking boots, whispered, "Sir Judge." The morning mist still clung to the pines around my cabin, and the air was sharp with the kind of anticipation you feel before a thunderstorm, or, apparently, the most spectacular downfall of an HOA president in county history. Marla Dunn, Queen Bee of the Timber Hollow HOA, was right behind him, screeching about unauthorized occupancy with that shrill, entitled voice that could shatter glass or patience, depending on which came first. She was pointing one French manicured finger at my front door, the same door she just tried to jimmy open with a Slim Jim and a laminated copy of the HOA bylaws, which she carried like scripture. And there I was, standing on my porch in nothing but a battered terry cloth robe, sipping black coffee from my Lady Justice mug gift from my clerks 2 decades ago and looking, I'll admit, like I just rolled off the bench into a live episode of Neighborhood Nightmares. Mara's face went from gloating to ashen real fast. She hadn't realized she'd just tried to break into the mountain retreat of a retired federal judge who, let's just say, had put folks away for less. But she'd learn. Oh, would she ever? My name's Leonard Tracy. I'm 62, semi-retired, and I came to Timber Hollow 2 years ago, thinking I'd found peace in the pines after decades in courtrooms, conference rooms, and the kind of legal wars that make national headlines. Truth is, I bought this place for its quiet, its trees, the way the creek murmurs through the backwoods, and the promise that for once I could just be left Alanino subpoenas. No 4-hour conference calls about paragraph spacing on legal briefs. No more staring down prosecutors and defense attorneys who thought they'd invented the Constitution. I wanted to learn to tie a fishing fly. I wanted to remember what sunrise looked like. What the glossy Timber Hollow brochure didn't mention was that the HOA board here was less community caretakers and more Spanish Inquisition with clipboards. Marla had been in charge for years, running things with the iron fist of a woman who'd once been told she looked like a news anchor and never quite recovered. She wore matching athletic wear, accessorized down to the clipboard, and terrorized anyone within a 5-mile radius who dared hang a wind chime, plant a garden gnome, or, God forbid, choose the wrong shade of green for a front door. My first week here, I got cited for an unauthorized audio device. Turns out my daughter's wind chime from Japan violated code 7.3 on ambient noise. 3 days later, another citation, this time for painting my door pine valley green instead of the approved forest pine green. Mara taped a magnifying glass to that one, just to really drive home the point. Within a month, I'd racked up 12 citations, 3 warnings, and 1 formal notice of concern about my failure to maintain appropriate enthusiasm for community standards. I'd been on the bench 30 years and never seen anyone wield petty authority with such theatrical, almost artistic incompetence. At first, I thought it was just Abe. I was the only one with a target on my back. Turns out, everyone in Timber Hollow had their own war story. Mara once fined a family $500 for a gnome she claimed was making an inappropriate gesture. She tried to buy thermal imaging equipment for a neighborhood watch. Her subcommittee's mailbox fonts, butterfly defense, flagpole alignment were legendary, and in most cases, attended only by Mara and her long-suffering husband Gerald, a decent guy who confided in me at the hardware store that moving here was for his health. What he really meant, I'd learned, was sanity. If Mara's HOA was a private militia, her arsenal was forms for mowing schedules, forms for shrubbery, forms for the wattage of porch lights. She kept a surveillance log of every resident's comings and goings, community safety. She called it stalking with spreadsheets. Everyone else agreed. It wasn't long before her attention shifted from citations to surveillance. I found a wildlife cam pointed at my front door, then in my living room, and finally, I kid you not, aimed directly in my bathroom window. When I put up curtains, I got a citation for window treatment violations. Apparently, my blackout curtains were too opaque and hindered community oversight. Her madness escalated. She hired safety consultants, her nephew and his college buddy, who strolled my property with clipboards, jotting down things like solar panels may interfere with aviation signals. Yeah, that happened. Then came the incident that changed everything. I'd been out late at a colleague's retirement party. When I got home, there were muddy boot prints circling my cabin, scratches around my door lock, hinges scuffed where someone had tried to pop the pins, and most a broken security cam. Taped to the window was an official HOA letter on stationery Marla had designed herself. Occupied dwellings must undergo surprise safety inspection per HOA Authority Section 12B.2. I photographed everything like I'd done for decades as a judge, footprints, scratches, the whole crime scene. Then I pulled the SD card from a hidden birdhouse cam and watched, stunned, and, I'll admit, kind of impressed at the level of idiocy. Mara, decked out in tactical gear, spent nearly an hour failing to break into my cabin, then smashing my security camera, and finally taping her note to my window. I called some friends, Detective Burke, ADA Jennifer Chun, and Sheriff Holbrook. You know you've made an impression when the sheriff's first words are, "Sir Judge." Within a day, the boardroom was silent as I played security footage of Marla's botched B&E for everyone to see. When she started quoting bylaw sections that didn't exist, the board realized they'd been living under imaginary rules for years. The next morning, the sheriff's deputies rolled up, with Marla following in her infamous pink Suburban, blaring about violations. But Deputy Harlow Hode, interned in my courtroom, recognized me instantly and shifted from routine complaint mode to treat this like a federal case mode. When Marla screeched that she had absolute authority, Harlow's voice dropped an octave. "Ma'am, you just tried to break into a retired federal judge's home. That's not an inspection. That's a crime." As Mara fumbled through her clipboard and paint swatches, "His trim is hunter green, not forest green." I handed over a flash drive full of evidence. She was cuffed on my driveway, still ranting about gnomes and mailbox fonts as she was loaded into the cruiser. Her husband, Gerald, who looked about ready to melt into the pavement, apologized for 6 years of madness. Turns out, Marla had terrorized 3 neighborhoods before Timber Hollow. Here, she'd found her kingdom. The investigation that followed was a goldmine. Mara had issued bogus fines, spent HOA funds on night vision goggles and drones, forged keys to 12 houses, kept files on every resident. My own was 300 pages, including a psychological profile based on my preference for blackout curtains. Her safety consultants had compiled lists of potential insurgents. The state charged her with everything from trespass to embezzlement. The feds piled on with mail theft and impersonation of a federal officer. She had a fake marshal's badge made and waved it around like she was in an episode of Law & Order. Her trial was standing room only. Marla tried to defend herself, declaring, "HOA bylaws supersede state and federal law." The judge wasn't having it. Restitution, prison, a lifetime ban from HOA. Boards. Marla's shriek of disbelief as she was sentenced still echoes in Timber Hollow folklore. After that, the change in the neighborhood was immediate. Flags flew at every angle. Gnomes multiplied, and folks dared to laugh out loud on their porches again. The new board president reduced the bylaws from 300 pages to 12, and Gerald moved to Maine, finally free. Marla's story hit the news, went viral, became a podcast, The Timber Hollow Tyranny, and even sparked a state law capping HOA power. 6 years on, Timber Hollow is the peaceful, weird, neighborly place it always should have been. The HOA meets once a month for coffee and donuts. The newsletter features jokes about aggressive lawn growth. The new residents can't believe the tales we tell. Last I heard, Marla was reorganizing files in a Nevada law office, still drafting rules for her cat. You know, sometimes all it takes is one stubborn neighbor and a clipboard to tip the scales. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it just takes the law applied with a little common sense and a lot of sunlight. So here's to the gnomes, to the wrong shade of green, and to every last unauthorized wind chime that dares to tinkle in the mountain breeze. And now I want to hear from you seriously. Drop your wildest HOA stories or your take on where the line is between keeping the peace and going full-on clipboard dictator. Was justice served here, or did it go too far? I'll be reading every comment, so let's get the debate started.